Margaret. I never thought I'd actually get to appear at Glastonbury, given my complete lack of musical skills. So to Joe and Mary Claire, you've not just provided us with Glastonbury, you provided us with Glastonbury weather to go with it. But I am happy to be back at MacGill. I thank Joe, Mary Claire, Michael and the committee for putting this together. And let's just maybe move away from the topic for a minute and pay tribute to that committee. We appear in Glenties every year. Some of you, we enjoy the week, enjoy the debate. We assume somebody waves the magic wands, puts it all together, and we disappear off again and book the hotel for next year. But there's a very hard-working committee pulling all this together in a way that other summer schools could learn from in terms of how inclusive it is. And that committee is replicated across the country at the moment, organising festivals and events and voluntary effort. There's no return to anybody for this. And to that spirit, here in Glenties and over the country, at a time when we're here in Glenties reflecting on the downsides of Ireland in 2010, let's celebrate that spirit as well. And let's celebrate that commitment of Irish people right across this island, particularly this time of year when our tourism season is at a height. So to Joe, to Mary Claire, thank you, and thank you to communities all over the country. When the Taoiseach rang me the day of the reshuffle a couple of months back and presented this job to me, I asked him what I had done to him. Did I insult him in some way? But since then, I have spent a fair bit of time getting my head around the Irish public service and the civil service and everything that goes with it, our myriad of agencies, of legislation, of actors, of unions and everything that has had it. And I've made a couple of early conclusions. Firstly, I think the commentary around our civil service is incredibly focused and polarised, and focused on the worst aspects of it, and on pay and how pay relates. And very little effort and commentary is given to the actual people involved and their personal stories and their personal contributions. We had the most appalling tragedy in this county last week. 8 people killed in the blink of an eye, and I sympathise with their family and their friends. And I was in Ijon doing a couple of events yesterday, and you can still feel it there, the sense of grief and loss. The response to that tragedy was led by public servants, by guards, by nurses, by firemen who are part-time in many cases and would have taken a phone call and gone there without thinking what they were going to. Nurses in Letterkenny A&E and doctors in Letterkenny A&E who didn't know what was coming into them and had to manage the grief and the desolation of that 8 hours. And that is happening all over the country in different phases, in different spheres as we speak today and right throughout every day of the year. Public servants are putting themselves in positions that we couldn't even dream about the impact it's having on their own personal lives. And we never focus on that, either as government or as politicians or as journalists. We actually never focus on the personal. We put it in the context of strategies and budgets and that. And I think we need to do more of that. As Sean has said, we have 300,000 plus people working in the service, many of them doing super jobs, others not doing such great jobs. But the systems of recognition and reward and promotion are so flawed and in need of change that we have very little way of differentiating and encouraging those that are doing it. In terms of service, I'm not into the ideology of it and the academic and business ideology. Should we have Swedish big government or should we go small government and less employed in the service? We just have to be practical about what we're dealing with. Questions we need to answer are, what's our public service good at? What can it get better at? What can it co-deliver with the private sector or the not-for-profit sector? And that's not a political answer, a management or a union answer. We have to also look at what does the public service actually have to do in 2010 and 2010 plus. What is it going to do in the context of dramatically reduced resources in the years ahead? And are there things that it needs to stop doing? And that's where we're really bad. I think Blair mentioned something in the region of 500 plus agencies. And Don mentioned something similar, that we create agencies, and we're good at doing that. But when they've run out of steam and run out of relevance, we're not so good at decreating them. A couple of weeks ago, I met a group of agencies, and it struck me that there was maybe 10 or 11 of them involved in what I thought was the same area, with all of the paraphernalia that went with that, back office functions, different management teams, payroll systems. And I made a mental note to myself, and I was looking at notes that had followed when I left the meeting. They had prepared notes on how the discussion went afterwards. And one of the issues that was raised that day, ministers shouldn't meet us like this, he'll think there's too many of us. And that actually came back in a discussion at a meeting, kind of was justifying my own logic. But what we need to do is get better at answering those questions and keeping the discussion within the frame of those questions. And every service we offer and every service we're involved in can fit into that particular frame, and then we can work from there. And yes, there are private sector approaches. And I'm not saying, Blair or John, that the private sector have all the answers. They clearly don't in the last few years. But there's a lot of things that work in the private sector. There's a lot of things, a lot of ideologies, a lot of management systems that work. Don has shown us some of them today that will challenge us. And ultimately, the job is that we deliver better services to the people of the country. And if it works in the private sector, and if we have the expertise in the private sector, I'm not going to exclude it from the debate because it's coming from the private sector. And, you know, ideologies and debates around that, we need to move on. Croke Park, we have ratified it since we were here last. And to me, what Croke Park defines is a shared view between the management and unions about change in the public service. Change is going to be a far more efficient service. Change that ultimately has to deliver better services to the public, but also in doing so, better working conditions for those that work in the service. And this is not a government issue or a union issue. This is a matter for every one of those 300,000 people plus who work in the service. And the difficulty with any agreement, be it Croke Park or a social partnership, is that they're agreed and negotiated to a certain extent in isolation from what actually happens on the ground. This one was done in Croke Park, was done through late nights, similar ones were done in government buildings. And this is going to make it more challenging for us to sell it on the ground, to implement it on the ground, and to work with the public services to make sure that they know what their role is, they know what the opportunities for them are in it. And that is the work that is underway now with the implementation body that we have set up, chaired by PJ Fitzpatrick, who this week has communicated his thoughts on it, with union representation and with management representation around it. And for me, the Croke Park Agreement is only one piece of the jigsaw. The transformation agenda, and I think Blair touched on this, is a much broader agenda item. And it has been on the block for quite some time now, and we've been talking about it for quite some time. We've been consulting, and until the cows have gone home, every night about changes in the service. The days for consulting and the days for talking are gone. We need to implement the change. And yes, it has to be done on a shared basis, but consultation cannot be a brake on progress that is needed and long overdue. The agreement provides for that transformation specifically in return for income and job protection. It also allows us to a model to share the benefits and any savings that we make from the transformation process back with those that work in the service. It delivers certainty about redundancies and about outsourcing of public service jobs. And I think in the context that we're in, and in the economic context that we're in, it's the best assurance that we have to provide those certainties, but also to provide us with a roadmap for change. It has endorsed a willingness to change, a willingness to redeploy, to work in different locations, to retrain, to take on more responsibility, to adopt new work practices, and to work across professional, technical and sectoral boundaries. One of the most frustrating things to be a public representative at the moment is to find blockages in areas of public sector demand where there's not enough staff to deal with them. And then look at other areas of the public service where there are surplus staff who want something to do. But because of different city blockages in the past number of years, arrangements with unions, arrangements within departments, as Sean said, the silo effect, you cannot move people across to deal with where the demand is. And as Blair said, we need a service that is people-focused, that you don't have people waiting on the street for a passport, waiting on the street for a social welfare payment, or for any service. And we can do that now with respect for the staff involved by moving staff into areas where there is challenges. I have had, in the last year in the department, responsibility for redundancy payments, where we've had 7-month delays in paying people's basic redundancy entitlements. That is not good enough. But I have found it virtually impossible to get extra staff in We have located all of our surplus staff in the department into dealing with the backlog. But in terms of getting staff from other departments, it was impossible because of arrangements. And that is not fair on the person who's waiting for the redundancy payment. And I know that there are people willing to do so. And hopefully under Croke Park we will have the opportunity to move people around to where there are delays and people getting their basic entitlements. And that in itself will build confidence in our public service, will build pride in the service and the service that they deliver. The Croke Park, though, is March. It's relatively recent. The Transforming Public Services agenda has been around, as Blair has said, since 2008 in the context of the OECD report. And the OECD report has challenged us that we need to continually modernise and reform our public sector and our public service systems and practices. And there is, in fairness, as has been pointed out by Don and by Blair and by Sean, there's a lot of stuff, good stuff going on. We had the Public Service Excellence Awards a few weeks ago in Dublin Castle, where some superb examples of excellent work were presented from across the service around the country. HSE, county councils, various revenue organisations, delivering a lot of new services online, our services that were community focused and community involved. And I think we need to celebrate more of that and use that system as a way to encourage and show that innovation is possible within our public service, that innovation is rewarded, and we actually need to, that those involved in those projects are rewarded. We need to renew our public service. We need to make it more resilient. We'll do that with greater redesign of services. We're going to have to reinvent a lot of the organisations. Some of them will be lost. It will also require a review of legislation, and that's one conclusion that I've come to. And Pat Rabbit last night and Don today has given us examples and some suggestions of some ways that legislation could be reviewed. And we will be coming back to that in the autumn. We're going to have to look at new channels of delivery for existing services. We're going to have to bundle services differently than we have to date. We're going to have to get rid of discontinued services. There's no sense in continuing to do things that are no longer of relevance to people just because we've always done them since the foundation of the state, and we don't have the ability to stand back for them and say it's time to move on and time to do things differently. And I think there's several examples of how we have done this. One of the more controversial ones in recent times was the Cancer Services Programme, where we have completely transformed and changed the way we deliver cancer services in this country. I think one of the speakers, it was Don, spoke about the health service having a kind of a broad budget. The Cancer Services Programme is different, with a ring-fenced budget, with a very good leader in Professor Tom Kane, who was able to communicate what he was doing, able to take on the various stakeholders in it. And now we are already seeing a change and a much better improvement in our outcomes for patients. So it's possible to do it. I think that if we take the attitude that it's an impossible task and it's going to be hard, so we better not do it, we better not shake it up, then we're not going to go anywhere. We'll be here this time next year again talking about public service transformation. And in fact, this is the 30th anniversary. I bet you we'll be here in the 50th anniversary talking about public service transformation, unless we take the initiative now and actually get on the road. And I think we have the tools in to do it. I have to lead the political charge of it and the political side of it. We have the Taoiseach is very involved in this through the Cabinet Committee and Minister Lenihan, as well through the Department of Finance. We are making some appointments, and it's not a case of bringing someone in from the private sector thinking that they have a magic wand and they're going to change it all for us in happy days. We're going to appointing a Chief Information Officer, a CIO, because we have so much going on in the public service in terms of e-government. There is so much of all of your and all of our information being stored on computers, right across the system, that we need somebody who's going to take responsibility for the management of that information, somebody who's going to take responsibility for using the internet and using the opportunities of that to make the services to you better. We need somebody who's going to take the responsibility to be the link person to encourage innovation throughout the service, and particularly in e-government. We're going to look at the shared services side of it. We have too much back office functions going on which are no longer needed. Pay functions in separate departments, in separate agencies, HR functions, as Sean has said, so much stuff that is getting in the way of us delivering better services that can be coordinated and facilitated much better. And we're confident that with a head of shared services we will get us to do that and drive that function on. We're appointing a head of public procurement. The government is one of the biggest spenders in the economy, as has been pointed out. What we need to do is make sure we're spending that money better. We need to make sure that it is tied in some way to employment creation. In the last number of years, our procurement model has moved away from small Irish SMEs. We've got to bring it back and create employment using government money for Irish SMEs, and I'm heading up some work in that. We are moving to establish a senior public service. And that's not just another layer of management, it's not going to be a bunch of Sir Humphreys running around the place with rhymes and that. What we want to do is to have a cadre of people who will have expertise and the ambition to be shared across departments. Similar to what Sean was saying in terms of graduates who move from department to department, bring their experiences, who will move in and out of the public and into the private sector and bring their experiences back in for the benefit of citizens. And we will be putting that into place in the coming months. And finally, we'll be completely reforming the way we make top-level appointments, some of the ones that Blair referred to. And we'll be reconstituting the top-level appointments committee with more outside members in the coming months in order to drive more change at the recruitment and selection level. And yes, it is madness that not every job in the public service is not advertised publicly, particularly at the time of where we have the moment of our unemployment, and that's something we need to change as well. Performance and delivery and accountability. They are the key verbs going forward. Everybody has to realise, working in the service, that they are responsible for somebody's, firstly, they're responsible for taxpayers' money. Secondly, they're responsible for somebody's concern or somebody's problem that to that person is the greatest thing in their life at that moment. And they need it solved and solved quickly. Not their file to be pushed around from desk to desk with the hope of not having to take a decision, push it up and somebody else will take the decision. And at the end of the day, whether that's you're queuing for a passport or whether that's you're waiting for a medical appointment or waiting on a house, that's a culture that we need to pervade it right across the system. We have to change the way we measure performance. Performance of organisations and individuals has to be aligned to specific targets and a specific service culture. We have to start measuring change and not things, and not files, not queues, measuring change, and change that has a positive impact on the citizen at the end of the day. It's not organisational completely, or structures or changes. We've got to focus our political system on it as well. A political system at the moment, that we have, and we've had enough discussion about it, getting into it again today, that we have a habit of dumping on the service at times when to cover our own mistakes or cover our own responsibilities. That has to stop. We have a habit of wasting the service's time in the service of our very clientless system. And the system is there, the system works, the system as it is at the moment, it has to be worked that way in order for this political system to, those of us who are in politics, to survive. And I often wonder when we're making reps, why are we doing this? We're doing it in order to keep my bread on the table and to keep my position in Leinster House. And in the system we have at the moment, that's the way it is. And there's some good discussion here on Monday night around that. But that has to change if we're demanding more change from within the civil service. We've got to demand change from ourselves as well, and the way that we operate things. Finally, Chairman, over the coming weeks, we will be launching the Public Service Advisory Board in order to give us a framework to distill all of these thoughts. There will be a mix of private sector people, not specifically from companies, people who don't have a day-to-day involvement, people from organisations. And we're putting a lot of thought into the people who will serve on that board to guide this process forward and act as a forum for this process. But ultimately, this process cannot happen in isolation from the public. We need, in the transformation process, to involve the public and let them have their say on what services they want, what delivery mechanisms they want, and what changes that they are willing to propose themselves. And that's something that I want to do. I'm very conscious that public service transformation, I think Don mentioned TK Whittaker, and it's been on, public service transformation has been probably on the agenda since 1916, if not before. And there's a lot of people who have stood here and stood around the country and said, yeah, we're going to change things, it's going to be great, and happy days, won't it all be great. And I was just flicking through the brochure there earlier, and there's a poem on page 16, and there's a verse which I think is quite relevant. I've seen the hopes of childhood stifled by the hand of time. I've seen the smile of innocence become the frown of crime. I've seen the wrong rise high and strong. I've seen the fair betrayed. Until the faltering heart fell low, the brave became afraid. But still the cry comes out to me. The homely voices call from the glen among the highlands of my ancient Donegal. That might be me next year. When we come back a year into this job. I don't know, will Joe call me back to account for the year and for some of the changes that we've outlined. But it is an interesting break in terms of my ambition. But I have an ambition for the service. And just because it's going to be hard, I'm not going to walk away from it, or I'm not going to give any less commitment to it. Of course it will be hard, but we have to do it. We have to do it in the interest of this republic, which is in need of a reform. And if we don't, then we'll be letting down the citizens of this republic. Agus go